Section 14. Rob noted, greetings. They said, yes, friends. Greetings said, good evening, Seth. Well, do you want to continue where you left off last time? They said, as you wish. Greetings said, you were going to define feeling for us. They said, so I was. Greetings said, do you want to do that now or would you rather wait? They said, however, that will come later in the session. Needless to say, emotion and feeling are the same, so any definition will include both. Rob asked, Jane has been very curious to learn something about her grandfather. Can you help us with this? They said, part of a very strong entity, however, extremely inarticulate in that life, due to an inability to synthesizing gains in past lives. Rob asked, why was Jane so attached to him when she was a child? They said, besides normal reasons, he was psychically inclined. At a time when Jane was young and herself close to a past life, she sensed his deep and personal inner awareness. It confused and haunted him, since his inarticulateness applied also to thoughts within himself. He felt strongly but could not explain. In his solitary nature, he became close to being a mystic, but he was unable to relate his personality as Joseph Burdle with the social world at large, or even to the other members of his family. There was a blank, regretfully. He felt strongly his connection with the universe as a whole, and with nature as he understood it. But to him, nature did not include his fellow human beings. The solitariness that besieged him, because it did besiege him, is dangerous to any personality, unless it comes after identification with the human race. That is, in his feeling of unity with all that is, he excluded other human beings, and on your plane, it is necessary for the personality to relate to him. Only after such relation is isolation of that nature of benefit. Jane sensed her grandfather's feeling of identification with the rest of nature, however, and since she had not yet developed a strong ego personality as a young child, she felt no sense of rejection, as did, for example, the other members of the family. When he spoke of wine, she felt like wine, as any child will unself-consciously identify with the elements. He responded to his own attraction for her and was able to expand in her direction because she was not an adult. He was essentially childlike in one manner, and yet he had little use for most people. Had he lived to see Jane mature, the feeling between them might well have dissipated. He could not relate to another adult, and when in his eyes she joined the league of adulthood, he would not have been able to retain his strong leaning toward her. He never forgave his own children for growing up, nor did he forgive his wife for tending to earthly ways. Yet he related his own body, at least until the very end, very well with nature. He considered that he aged as a tree will age, but perversely he felt that others aged to spite him. It was an unfortunate defect in the personality. The psychic nature grew in an oddly distorted manner in some aspects and yet remained stumbling shrunken in others. From early age, however, Jane drank in his feeling of completeness with nature, and it had much to do with her later development. She now displays in some instances her grandfather's close attitude toward people. At times, both you and Jane reinforce each other along these lines. You must, of course, use discipline in personal relationships, but you must have personal relationships. As I think you are beginning to learn, you have both expanded in that direction, and that is good. Such relationships, disciplined of course, will nevertheless yield richness for both of you that neither of you would get in any other manner. You do not have to take hordes into your house. On the other hand, all stages of relationships are necessary, and a casual give and take between you and friends will expand your spirit in ways that neither you nor Jane personally can do alone. I am going into this manner because it has concerned both of you at various times, and I would like to state that your work will not suffer by expending energy in these other directions. I am speaking now of disciplined relationships. When you avoid them or attempt to avoid them, you both do so out of fear. Your personalities, work habits, and goals are well set and secure enough not to be threatened in such a manner. You also, Joseph, have much to offer other individuals, and through giving you yourself will grow. Keep your regular work habits intact. I know I need not tell you this, far be it from me, when I know your habits so well. When you were worldly, you were the fleshed man I knew. Now, in your conversation, you show the same tenacity of purpose. Your isolation during working hours becomes even more precious and more constructive when constructed with periods given to friends. As sweet is sweeter when bitter is on the tongue. You forget also that because of your make-up, all your experiences are translated into your work, and work becomes play, and play becomes work. As to your jottings this morning concerning art, very good, I commend you. You are already beginning to think in new and wider concepts. As your paintings are solidified feeling on board or paper, apparent in the physical universe, and therefore vulnerable to the laws of that universe, so is the universe itself on your plane physical materialized feeling, only with more dimension than a drawing or a painting. There is, however, also an extra dimension in a painting than people usually recognize, besides the lines and the color and the form and the content, which are, as you said, so aptly feeling solidified. You have the action of which you also spoke. First, you have the action of the lines, form and the content and so forth, caught and solidified. Then, as an observer looks at a painting, feeling is again motion moving out from the painting into the beholder's perception. As for your straight lines and curves, you realize, I know, that there are really no straight lines and curves, but that they are symbols. Otherwise, your dissertation was excellent. Action is solidified, or should I say, transfixed, in a painting, and yet even in a painting action is never really solidified or transfixed, but continually fluid. As far as the ink sketch is concerned, do not forget that while your man was imprisoned by his senses, in trying to reach beyond them in your physical universe, your man could not perceive anything at all. And yet, it is through these very earthy senses that he has a chance to glimpse beyond, or indeed realize that there is a beyond to glimpse. Perception of beauty through the senses is the trigger on your plane for subsequent inner perceptions. The two are so closely bound. Through music, for example, which can only be appreciated through the senses. Psychic actions take place which lead the individual beyond the senses. There is much more to be said here. There is a phrase which I will explain at a later date, inner senses, which you will find extremely interesting. By this I mean senses within the senses. I would use behind the senses, but I believe this would lead to confusion. I suggest you break. Quietly, however, do not crush into pieces. Everything on your plane is a materialization of something that exists independent of your plane. Therefore, within your senses, there are other senses that perceive inward. Your regular senses perceive, or as Jen would like to say, create, an outer world. The senses within them, that is, within the recognizable senses, perceive and create an inner world. They perceive part of an inner world. This is difficult for me to explain to you. However, as your regular senses are limited according to the plane which you inhabit. In your case, dear friends, on your plane extremely limited, I am afraid. So are the corresponding inner senses limited. It is almost as if you could see, feel, touch, and perceive so much outwardly, and feel, touch, see, and perceive so much inwardly, though much more exists in all directions, of which you are necessarily ignorant. Once you exist on a particular plane, you must necessarily be attuned to it while blocking out many other perceptions. It is a sort of psychic focus, a concentration of awareness along certain lines. As your ability grows in relation with the environment of your plane, then you can afford to look around, use the inner senses, and enlarge your scope of activity. This is only nature. Survival on a particular plane depends upon your concentration in that plane. Again, when survival is more or less satisfied by attention, then you can avail yourself of the opportunity to turn your attention elsewhere. The time element is something I told you I would discuss, and if my intentions are strong, Ruber at this point is growing weak. And there is a certain element of time in this statement. The material itself has not made either of you vary. Time involved, or your idea of the time involved, has. On your plane, no action is really simultaneous, and so time instantly enters in. You mentioned yourself, Joseph. Oh, see, you can't hide anything from me. You mentioned earlier, I am sorry. Ruber needs a short break, a short one. Ruber should surface. You mentioned earlier, Joseph, that you had the feeling that I could refer back to myself almost as if I could turn a later page of a book to an earlier one, and of course, this is the case. To some extent, though to a much lesser degree, you can do this on your own plane, but in a weak fraction of a dimension. That is, you can perhaps sense or remember an earlier moment intuitively or capture an earlier moment visually as in a photograph, or audibly as in a recording. You can through motion pictures refer back to past time, capturing the visual and auditory data of a moment, and even the apparent motion of its sequence. Viewing through your so marvelous television. A historical moment, for example, you can refer to much that has passed. But this referral itself involves time. The time that you spend watching such a historic moment takes up an identical amount of time in the present. Therefore, 1 minute of such a past referral costs you 1 minute of present time. Also, you end up shortchanged. You give up your precious moment in the present, but you do not have a complete moment of the past to show for it. Seeing, for example, a crowd of people, even if you yourself were among the crowd, you cannot experience the feeling that you were experiencing when the picture was taken. And though you may see before you the pictures of people who stood in that crowd, neither you nor they can see or experience the emotions that they felt. There is much more to be said here. I must move into these things slowly. When I refer back to myself or back to what I have said in an earlier session, I do not spend an identical moment of time in doing so. That is, if 2 hours of your time were necessary for me to give you certain material, it does not take me the same amount of time to refer back to the whole body of the same material. I did not intend to make you work so hard this evening, Joseph. If your hand is working as quickly as Rupert's mouth, then you must be exhausted. Would you like to take a break, or would you prefer to end the session? I am always thinking of your convenience, at least when I am not concerned with your education. While I am not affected by time on your plane, I am affected by something resembling time on my plane. Time has no meaning without barriers. To put it another way, time has no meaning without the necessity to counteract against other actions. Basically, this is a gem of a description, if I do say so myself. The sad part is that you probably won't be able to understand it. It all takes time. As I tried to counteract your ignorance, I couldn't resist. I mean it kindly. You have no idea of the difficulties involved in explaining time to someone who must take time to try and understand the explanation. The study of time will teach you much about fifth dimension also. All imaginary wires composed of solidified vitality are fluid. I hope you understand this, even while they are solidified. For solidity is only illusion. I have said also that this feeling of vitality, and I prefer the term vitality, is moving and itself a part of the living stuff of the universe. Now, as these wires pass simply from plane to plane, they actually form the boundaries of each plane and become subject to the particular laws of the plane. Therefore, they become subject to time on your plane, and they become subject to other laws, if not laws of time, on other planes. The motion of the apparently solidified vitality gives the illusion of time. The counteraction involved in this case is counteraction within the core of vitality itself, in much the same manner that we spoke of a closed mental enclosure, multiplying and setting up motion within itself. The action and the counteraction is the time trigger. To you, this will be almost unbelievable, but on some other planes, motion is simultaneously at the time unknown. To me, time can be manipulated, used at leisure and examined. To me, your time is a vehicle, one of the several vehicles by which I can enter your awareness. It is therefore still a reality of some kind to me. Otherwise, I could not utilize it in any manner whatsoever. As an example of my good intentions, I will end this session. I felt extremely pleased with your friends of mine this evening. I would continue if I did not have your physical limitations to contend with. For some reason, I am able to come through very well, and when this happens, I like to take advantage of the opportunity. After all, do you blame me? I admit that I miss you occasionally between sessions, dear friends. And Robert, your voice almost reminds me now of your old one. In any case, I shall say good night. You should know that I too enjoy a moment of social discourse, or I would not keep you so long. I regret the necessity to keep Joseph so occupied. However, I try to speak to you, Joseph, and answer the questions you would ask if you had the time to open your mouth. Ralph noted. At the board, Jane and I said good night to Seth. With our hands on the pointer, we received an answer. They said, yes, goodbye. They said, besides, you owe me a session, having missed one. In one sense, meeting with you costs me little energy. It is true. On the other hand, the effort to communicate explanations does involve very real effort on my part. And so you are not the only ones who grow weary in this respect. As I have said, feeling is action, and in my communications to you, feeling plays a strong part. I realize that you both are tired. I enjoy speaking with you and wanted merely a few moments of what you might be pleased to call normal conversation. Friends do not always talk of high and weighty matters, and at times, when we have the energy left over from our philosophical dissertations, then let us now and then indulge in at least some pleasantries. Feeling acts in many words. It is the connective, and it strongly connects the three of us. If I sound ponderous, it is only because these necessary explanations cannot be given to you in a playful manner. You would discount them, and my dear Joseph, at times I peek in on you between sessions. The twist is a beautifully innocent and wicked contortion that I would enjoy. I see you both now very clearly, and I must say that I approve of what I see. I will try to answer a few questions, but let us keep these few moments in a light and pleasant vein. This is something of an experience involving your so-called emotions in these sessions for perhaps the first time. Previously, we have been too concerned with other matters for any interchange of an emotional kind. And if Robert's voice sounds rather dreary in this transitional phase, I myself am in a very playful, I might say frisky, mood. By all means, ask any questions and we will see what we can do. Ralph noted. At this point I laughed. Ralph said, I am afraid, Seth, that all the questions we have got written down here are rather serious. You caught us by surprise. They said, the trouble is, you see, you look upon me as a veritable fountain of knowledge, and I would also be known as a personality in myself and as a friend. Ralph asked, do you have friendships on your plane, as we do here? They said, I have friendships where I am, of course. The one thing about your plane that makes it such a tempting field of endeavor for all of us here is, of course, that we still have ties of an emotional kind, though clumsily, to make contact with friends. As you yourself write letters to friends in strange countries, and do not forget them, so we do not forget. Ralph asked, do you have a sense of play and relaxation on your plane? They said, we have a much stronger sense of play and relaxation than you have, and much more enjoyable. We can play as a child plays, having, however, full conscious appreciation, the I am principle, which the child lacks in his fanciful games. Ra'ad, do you also experience such emotions as anger? She said, I have to admit that you've lost me completely. Because we experience play, why does that mean we experience anger? In your terms, we experience emotions and therefore are capable of anger. However, we are so disciplined that anger seldom arises. It's almost impossible, I can see, to talk with you in a conversational manner for purely mechanical reasons. If I speak quickly in ordinary tones through rubber, you simply cannot write fast enough to take the words down. Some night I will speak to you as I choose for my own enjoyment. We shall have an interchange, and for that one night the nose will get the boot. I promise to speak on fairly personal and inconsequential matters, so that you do not miss my pearls of wisdom. The one thing that pleases me immensely is the way Ruber can translate at least a few of my humorous remarks and inflections of my nature speech. It is difficult to carry to you at this point, but I have hopes of doing better. Ruber's voice is an experiment. The immediacy of our sessions would be enhanced if more of my personality could come through. I could go on quite happily, you might say blithely, for hours, but I shall not. I would if I thought I could get away with it. I am not some old fogey. Now and then old Frank Watts comes through simply because he is the latest independent materialization, and is used to taking things upon himself. I have not assimilated him completely, but you can believe me, I intend to. I am glad, Joseph, that you enjoy my humor. What were you going to say? Ra said I was going to say that I got a charge out of your calling Frank Watts a fathead at our sentence the other night. They said, I am afraid I haven't learned humility yet. On the other hand, you knew me before I knew Frank Watts, and my vanity was astounding. You were quite vain yourself, and as a woman you certainly put your present wife to shame as far as vanity is concerned. I like Jane's plant very much. Green things are a touchstone of your existence. You notice I do not use the word planet but plane, since you do not have the whole kettle to yourself. As a man's voice, I fear Jane will sound rather unmelodious. I do not have the voice of an angel by any means, but neither do I sound like an asexual eunuch, which is all I have been able to make her sound like all night. And incidentally, Ruber, you were a good brother at one time. The so-called male aspect of your personality has always been strong, but by this I mean powerful. Without the loyalty that you are learning as a woman, your character had serious defects. And there, I said I would not get into anything serious. Ra'ad, how's the weather up there? Said, there is no weather. Whether or not you think there is, this involves far more than a playful question, and it would take me at least a month to answer. Ruber, if you want a cigarette, get one. She has been walking around with a match in her hand for the last 10 minutes. And don't blame me, Ruber, for your over-smoking. If I could have a glass of wine with you and enjoy it, I would. If you want Ruber to talk only for a few moments to me without the record, go ahead. I'll certainly last as long as Ruber will, and a lot longer. If ever your wife's features change imperceptibly some night as we talk, I suggest you do not mention it till the end of the session. Rupert makes a lovely woman, though he would have been horrified at the transformation. One of the reasons Jane does so well with her male characters, if you insist on no go ahead, is that she has been a male so many times. She has retained the better male characteristics. Please don't ask me to recite poetry again. It was never one of my lines. Rupert has always been gifted artistically, as you have, Joseph. With you, your art talents lay beneath layers of flashing lead at times. You were exceedingly lecturous in Denmark, and I was not much better. Your brother Dick is extremely impulsive, and much in need of friendly reinforcement and approval. Ross said, "Oh, we thought he was quite happy now." They said, "I didn't say he wasn't happy, merely impulsive and in need of friendly reinforcement." Dying as a boy in his last life, the experience of adulthood is new to him this time. The transition into adulthood is easier for people who lived to adulthood the last time. You are the dandiest note-taker I ever saw, Joseph. You take the proverbial cake. I know you are tired, but I have really enjoyed myself at your expense. From utter mercy, I will now stop and let you go to bed.